Good evening and welcome to night 6 of Online Darts Fallout Bar, brought to you by our sponsors, BoyleSports. A little technical hitch, but I was just reading through the comments in the chat room because the chat room is absolutely buzzing this evening, Dan, and wonder why.
Wasn't it tonight? Like, this is really cool. We got everybody getting involved. It's top draw.
How you doing, Dan?
I'm very good, but I tell you what, I just said to you before we came on, we have been absolutely spoilt rotten, you and I, these last few nights, haven't we? We have taken in some of the best action that we've seen at a Grand Slam or on the Grand Slam stage. Certainly in the last few years, it's been an absolutely incredible run of a few days. It's been superb, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a great night. We'll just drop into the chat room first. Jeez was in straight away, just talking about Josh Roth and introduced himself to the world of darts. Trade was also in talking about Josh Roth nice and early. Daniel's mentioned you've got to bloody love the darts. That's about spot on that. Darby's still talking about is Josh Roth developed or not. We also have Daniel in, as I've mentioned. Tommy's in. A lot of talk already about the MVG and Josh Roth Dane. Rose is in. Dob, as I mentioned, Trade. It is a very, very busy chat room this evening, Dan. And I've got a feeling that is down to what a fantastic night of darts we've had, and people just aren't enough.
Yeah, it has been a top draw night tonight. We like I say, we've just been spoiled, haven't we? It was superb.
Yeah, there's a certain Dane that obviously we'll talk about in a lot of detail because there's so much happening in it. But the start of the evening, starting with Nathan Aspinall and Jermaine Waterreus, and a lot of this game was going to be dependent on Waterreus' scoring and getting those opportunities and if he could produce them. However, what was very impressive tonight for me on Nathan Aspinall was his 140s and 180s and getting in control of the lead nice and early and getting those opportunities. And for anyone who didn't see Nathan Aspinall come through with a 10-6 victory, averaging 97.49 and Jermaine Waterreus 94.55. Your thoughts on this one, Dan?
I mean, it went largely the way that I thought it would, if I'm completely honest. Aspinall just had too much. I think we've been used to seeing Nathan quite a lot recently in really scrappy battles and having to really dig in and dig out results. And that absolutely wasn't what we saw from him today. Going into that first break, going into the first break in play, having had 2 breaks of throw, looking very comfortable at 4-1 up. And I didn't think, when Waterreus broke one back to bring that back to 5-3, but even then, there was no point really through the game that I really thought Waterreus was going to make a game of it. It's certainly in that back half of the game, the twice that Waterreus threw a max, Nathan threw a max in the same leg. So when Waterreus was able to get that scoring going and he was able to hit those 180s, Nathan was able to just match him on that and sort of just keep that distance, and he never let him get close. And I think you've got to credit Aspinall with that, because he just played very well, very professional performance. Didn't light the world up, didn't do anything staggering on the stage, but went out there and did everything that he needed to do to get the job done and get the match won. It was a really professional performance from him. I was very impressed.
Yeah, and back to that sort of Nathan Aspinall determination, it seemed like, and I know it was mentioned in the Toms as well, it seemed like he had set himself targets through that game. And one of the first ones being making sure he had a break, if not a double break, at that first interval. And down in at 4-1, there was a lot of emotion from Nathan Aspinall, which, yes, we see sometimes, but we don't always see that early on. And the fact he broke Jermaine Waterreus in 2 out of the 3 times Jermaine had throw, and one was with a 13 darter, one was with a 15 darter, just really showed that Aspinall knew that tonight it wasn't about getting involved in a dodded fight that he's used to being in, because what I mean is producing some good stuff at the moment. So he wanted to avoid that, and then in front early on seemed to be a huge motivation to him, as well as, which we've seen before, when his granddad's in the crowd, there always seems to be a special Nathan Aspinall performance, even if it's not, brilliant averages, big check outs, loads of 180s. It's just a very, very determined Nathan Aspinall, and for me, he was up for that from the off.
Oh, yeah, and it does. It showed you the way the way that he came out, and that first little mini session of 5 legs there. He just looked. He never looked like losing that match at any point. And as I say, even going into the second break, and what I mean, had pulled one of those break back, and they went in at 6-4. You didn't feel at any point that it was going to become that scrappy dog fight at all. Nathan was just seemed very focused on just getting the job done. I think he knew quite quickly in that game what he had to do. Getting off to such a good start's great, because he's defending from there. He knows that if he holds his throw, he's fine, and it's not even going to be close. He managed to, the break that Gerwen got, Asp took it back fairly quickly when they started the final session, and I just think there wasn't too much magnificent happened, but very professional, really good performance from the Asp. Yeah,
very much so. I do try and keep looking into the comments throughout our chats, and John O'Shea has joined us after he was asking me earlier on what time we're going live, and he's joined us straight away with the comment about Josh is still developing. John, we will move on to Josh Roth very shortly, because one thing I will say is I can't remember the last time someone has been spoken about so highly after losing a game of darts. It's been a very, very long time since someone's been spoken about in this life, and very much rightly so. But we will come on to that very shortly. I mentioned there about break number 1, Nathan Aspinall was determined, and it seemed like that 4-1. At interval number 2, there was an incident that occurred that I missed at the first time of watching, and I had to rewind it back. However, the Eagle Eyes Missy did spot it. So we're just going to go to that clip first, and because tonight's action has been that good, we've got a third person who's going to join the show as well, who is just sitting in our waiting room. So let's just hear from the Asp first, and then we'll get the third person in.
Yeah, probably, but it was no jest at Jermaine. It's purely the fact that that's how I played in that second session. The sign, that's how I played in my eyes. I did it, I done it. It's just one of them spur of the moment things. It is what it is. It's nothing I can do now, but I can't say anything on that. It's what it is.
Just for people who didn't spot it, I'm not one to swear, but it was something like this that happened on screen that Nathan Aspinall done. And you would think, Dan, that they would learn from these moments after someone did that the other day.
Yeah, it's been a funny old tournament for hand gestures, hasn't it? It's like, I don't know what we see next. Is someone giving it that? So I don't know. What are we going to see in the next couple of days? It's been definitely a tournament for hand gestures. It's I mean, I was exactly the same as you. I'd have completely missed it had it not been for. See, I think sometimes they'd have got away with murdering, that most people wouldn't have known about that if the commentators hadn't allayed in and then and mentioned it, and I found myself rewinding to have a closer look and a little chuckle.
No
reference. I just walked into.
No reference whatsoever to the hand gestures that were made on stage. Dob, welcome to the show. Nice of you to join us.
Yeah, that was an interesting watch for 30 seconds.
I was waiting perfectly, because I was fortunate enough to be able to see your reaction in the background where no one else did. That's why I left you waiting just that little bit longer before we introduced you.
Well, if you'd messaged me, I could have been sat doing the Aspinall sign inappropriately and then have been caught out, and it would have been the same thing. But, you don't think that far ahead.
Just your thoughts then before we move on to day number 2, Jack. Aspinall, Jack, I know, yeah. Getting over the trying to remain professional. Getting over the line, not a.
You've just pulled 3 different inappropriate signs and said fuck twice.
I didn't swear on any occasion. So when you're listening to this on the podcast, I did not swear. Right. Dob, over to you. Just on the Asp performance, it was more a gritted performance from Aspinall and not the battle that we've seen him so far throughout the week.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really get drawn into a battle, did he? He did the decent things early enough, got out ahead against Jermaine. You probably expect Aspinall to hold it together a bit more in the key moments than you see from Jermaine, who was perhaps a bit of a surprise in qualifying compared to how he's been form-wise for the rest of the year. Very, very recent form has been good, so that wasn't really a surprise in that regard. But in terms of full campaign 2022, you would not have put Jermaine in this event. It was job done for Asp. He's on a different path at the minute. He's returned looking really strong and is peaking at the right time for the season as well.
Yeah, and the further we goes, the less it will hit him financially for the fine. I'm sure he's done a debt for that hand gesture that he made on stage. But
Did he make a hand gesture? We should have said.
We move on to Dame number 2. And this one saw Johnny Clayton and Alan Souter go head-to-head. And for me, Johnny Clayton just couldn't let go in this Dame. And Alan Souter, once again performing. We've seen it at the World Championship last year. We've not seen an awful lot from Souter to the levels he's performed before. Phil, behave in the chat room. But Dan, it was Alan Souter who got over the line in this one.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to see him sustain that level over a longer format. Obviously, we've seen him a few times play very well in this tournament, and he's had a very good year. But just to be able to sustain that. Now, we did see, we've talked about the form of Johnny Clayton this week and how he's played and how he's performed. We saw glimpses during that match, and it did. I was watching it, and I was probably like lots of people waiting for it to fully click, because it kept looking like it was, one visit away. He'd have a visit, and then you sort of felt like if you could follow that visit up, then he'd really just start to click into gear, and it just didn't seem to quite get there. The 136 was beautiful, but it was too sporadic throughout the game for Johnny, and he couldn't quite put a string of legs together. But that should not detract away from what was a superb performance from Alan Souter. And, held his nerve. It did look like it could have got tight towards the end. At 9-8, there was a chance, but he just found that 140 at the right moment. The 138 that came just after that was just really sucked the life out of a potential rise from Johnny to really take that to the very edge. But again, a very professional performance from Souter. Didn't look wobbled or unnerved at any point on stage. Looked very, very comfortable and really impressive. I think he's given a really, really good account of himself this week, especially tonight.
How have you mentioned that 136 without mentioning the finger point that followed by Johnny Clayton? Dan, I do not know, because we saw it at that time, and I'm with you that I thought that was the time to back. However, Dob, coming to you on this checkout, for me that really stood out, Jamie's mentioned it in the chat room, it was, at the time, it was 7-6 and Clayton was then back into it. Clayton had left 24, and then Alan Souter, on that trusted double 18 that he's used all week, set up the 114 perfectly. And yes, Johnny Clayton still battled back, but that seemed to be the point where the confidence levels lifted once more for Souter.
Yeah, I think that once Johnny takes out the 136, the momentum is sort of in his favour. He's got that bit more experience. He's won more titles, and you think if he gets on a little bit of a roll here, Souter might start to wobble a bit. I completely agree with the fact that it's just not really been Johnny's year so far. He's looked knackered since I saw him in Amsterdam, and even then he was probably waning a little bit at that point. So this dip in form overall has been coming. But the response with the 114 after Johnny's taken out the 136, he takes the next leg as well, starts getting on that little bit of a roll. You're thinking, hang on a minute, is this the bit where Johnny turns it around, gets going, and we start seeing what Johnny's made of back end of the year? But it's just not clicking for him at all. Take nothing away from the Souter performance. Was magnificent. Through the first 10 legs, I think he was averaging over 100, finishes with a 97 average. But that 114 just knocks the stuffing out of Johnny, who just can't seem to buy a deep run at the minute.
Yeah, you mentioned there about how well Souter played throughout the game. Yes, there was spells where we dropped off, and missed a couple of. He was swaying into ones and fives, a few more than we've seen throughout the week. And to be honest, Souter spoke about that performance and spoke about it in a bit detail that I still feel there's more to come. Let's hear from Alan Souter now.
I don't know. I don't quantify it in that way. It's a great question because I don't have an answer for it. I think everyone back home in Scotland will be buzzing off of that, but I just play darts and I think I'm better than that. I know I'm better than that. So I've played darts with these guys for 20 years, 30 years, but some of them went to PDC and got better. I'm now getting better, finding my feet, and I know I can cause a little bit of upsets in these tournaments, and for being in the top 40 in the world, people look at me and think, oh, it's just suits, but I can take these guys out.
Before we come back to comments in that, many congratulations to Phil Bars for asking a great question for the first time in his lifetime. Even Suits replied that was a great question.
I've done it once or twice before in the 10 or so years he's been doing it, but yeah, we'll give him credit where it's due.
A little did after his comment in the chat room before he's now jumped off. But just one more thing on this game, Dan. We've seen, obviously, Suits now dead over the line. We've seen him have a good run at the World Championships. Instead of just this spurts in these tournaments, do you think how far do you think Souter can push on up the rankings? Do you think he can reach top 20, top 16? Or do you think that's still too far with the commitments as well he has outside of the darting scene?
I think, and where's he landed there? 36. Well, I mean, let's be honest. At 36, he's not a million miles away from the magic 32, which is where things start to change for you in terms of seedings and life being made a little bit easier when it comes to the bigger tournaments. So I think certainly to get into that pack is not just achievable, but likely over the next 6 months. It's just about sustaining, but it's just about how much he can sustain that level. Like we've seen him go on runs, we've seen him go deep in Pro Tour events, we've seen him play very well in tournaments. You know, he's going as good as I've seen him in a tournament in the minute, but it's just how much he can keep that level up. And yes, he does go away and do other things. You know, finishes work, tries back, does a night shift, comes back, and it I don't know, to be completely honest. It's going to be really interesting to find out just where he can, because he's certainly got the level to compete in and around that top 25. Like he can certainly compete at that level very well, you know, without having to hammer his A game all the time. It's just how often he can do it, and not so much how often he can do it in one tournament and put 3-4 games together in a tournament, because we know he can do that as well. It's whether he can play well in a tournament, go away, come back, play well over a period of 2-3, you know, Pro Tour events, then play well at the next tournament. And sustain that level throughout a period of time. That's what's really interesting to see.
Yeah, agree, Mr. Simpson. So that Alan Souter 10-8 win did seal a quarterfinal spot on Saturday night with Nathan Aspinall. And then we move on to game number 3. I think this game needs to be brought up in sections, if I'm being honest, lads, because there was so many key moments in this one, and what a perfect way to start. We will come to you first, Dob. When the scores are 3-2 at the first interval, and Michael van der Wijn is averaging 115.38, but he's losing 3-2. My God, what has happened?
What's happened is Josh Rock has gone absolutely berserk. The fact he's won that 5th leg on a broken ankle as well is just crazy. Look, the kid's got it. And a lot of people have known the kid's got it for a long, long time now. I say a long, long time, in 11 months that we've seen or heard of him. When he didn't make a massive splash when he first came into the PDC, right? He got his tour card, was pretty consistent, and then was just consistently 96, 97 on the Pro Tour. He didn't come in and smash up a Pro Tour. He didn't come in and start lifting titles or dominating Peter Wright, etc. off the board, but he was just consistently very, very good. And that's a little bit unheard of. And in the 11 months since, he's just got even better, which is a scary thought when you already had the best average on the Pro Tour after the first 4 blocks or whatever it was. He's just got bottle in abundance, not fazed by anything, seems very grounded as well. The team around him seem superb. The other players and guys on tour can't seem to compliment him highly enough. And he's just got that little bit of swag as well, hasn't he? He's got his little 180 celebration. It's not too brash, but it's not so much so that he just gets on with it and there's nothing for the other players to contemplate about. He just held himself together unbelievably well, promised a good performance, was content with a good performance. I think that's a little bit for future prospects. I think genuinely he might be kicking himself. That there's no way he's like, yeah, I'm happy with that. You might be happy with that on first reaction because it is Michael van Gerwen. But when you've just had a chance at him and you're 7 each or 8-8 or whatever it was, you'll be kicking yourself just that little bit after the level of performance you put in. But yeah, the first 5 legs, which is what the question was actually about, ridiculously good.
Yeah, it was ridiculously good. And then moving on to the sort of the second session of the game, Dan, obviously what we had in the first session was never down to be matched. However, at 5 apiece, the averages at that point were still 105 to Josh Roth, 111 to MVG, with the session averages being 108 MVG and 104 Josh Roth. And I think what that showed is we saw a dip in performance by both players. But when you see a dip in performance by both players, and one is averaging 108 and one is averaging 104, that just shows how great this game was, not just early on, but throughout.
Yeah, it really was just something else, and it was completely blow for blow as well, and I did feel like they were feeding off each other. Michael probably more so than Josh Rock. I do think Josh Rock was going about his business. You know, I think he did what he said he was going to do when he was going to stand on stage and play his darts. Now, and I think that's what he did. I think he did play his game. I think what the thing that not so much went wrong for Josh Rock, but what's caused him some trouble tonight is he's playing against one of the few players in the world that really, really, more than anything, feeds off his opponent playing incredibly well. And there are 90% of people that Josh Rock coming and doing that, so hitting a 9 so early in the game and playing the way he was would have had a negative effect on other people. On Michael van Gerwen, it just made him play better, and Michael van Gerwen looked absolutely incredible. Like he looked superb, like properly at his best tonight, I thought. And you could say at 5-all, you did just sort of think you couldn't predict what was going to happen, because you sort of felt at 5-all it could have been 10-5 either way, or we could have gone to 9-all and had a decider. It was so bonkers, and they were both playing so well. You were almost looking for the first one to crack, and it did feel at some point like somebody had to. It couldn't be sustained at the level it was sustained, and it did tail off a little bit. Josh tailed off in the last couple of legs of the match, and Michael didn't, and that really was the main difference in this game, is that Josh just ran out of steam in that back end legs 17, 18, and Michael didn't stop, just didn't run out of gas at all.
Yeah, just before them last couple of legs, Dob, MVG, we know that he wants to beat records, whether that's in one game or whether that's a record that Phil Taylor's got or anything like that. But in this game, the record of the highest checked-out was 141, and the turning point was MVG to the 142, just to let that little one over Josh Rock. But what a time that was to hit that 142 as well.
Yeah, the other record he was potentially about to break was the highest losing average, so he wouldn't have wanted that one either. That moment, look, I don't want to say I jinxed it either, but moments before that 142, that was at 7-all, wasn't it? I looked at my brother and went, this has been unbelievable from Josh, but it's got the feeling that he's going to be the plucky loser 10-8. And Elliot goes, what? You think Michael's going to win 3 of the next 4 legs? And I was like, he needs one break. 30 seconds later, bang, he produces the 142 at the exact moment. Josh Rock does nothing wrong in that leg, doesn't do an awful lot wrong in the next leg, tries to cling on in what turns out to be the last leg. I think that's the one that gets away from him just a little bit, but the rest of it was solid. That 142 from Michael is just, it's just what he does. Right things, right moments. Michael van Gerwen, peak. And there's plenty in the chat room saying that he doesn't get this result a year ago, or he doesn't hit that a year ago, and whatever else. There's just a different level of focus to him on TV right now, and that 142 proved it.
Yeah, it did. And as you mentioned, that Dan alluded to the Josh Roth dropping off. However, MVG just had to hold his throw twice, and he did it with a 15 and 16 darter. And yes, we sometimes talked about 10, 11, 12 being fantastic legs, but under that pressure, to be able to let a 15 darter and a 16 darter are just as big as what a 10, 11 is with that pressure on Josh Roth. Let's hear from MVG, and then we will just come back and talk about the man who has surely developed Josh Roth.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm also feeling well, and I'm comfortable. My family is well, and that's all part of the journey. Do you know what I mean? And from there on, I think I can even produce more. But I'm still in the tournament. I'm going well, but I've not won anything. You know, this is just a game of darts, and people also have to realise that.
On the stage as well, you were very reserved. Where we had some celebrations,
not reserved.
Key times.
I wasn't reserved. I was just keeping my focus going, and sometimes you do it with. A different way of celebrating a good shot, but now I was more into my own zone, and it helped me today, and I think I did well.
He was very zoned. He was very... Go on, Dan.
I said, I just think it's frightening that. If you're another player in that tournament, I think it's terrifying. Because it's not... It's one thing watching him play well. But you sort of know he's got that game. I think what's really terrifying is when you listen to his interviews, both straight after the game and then with Phil there, and you think, oh man, his mind is completely tuned in as well. And that's when he's really frightening, because his game hasn't gone away. He's always got the game. When his mind's properly tuned in as well, and he's focusing, thinking about how he's acting on stage, where his focus is at, and how he is going to achieve the best results, that I think is the thing that makes him a very, very frightening prospect at the minute.
Yeah, very, very frightening. And when you add on that the titles that he's won this year with the Grand Prix, the Match Play, the Premier League, the confidence is just through the roof for Michael van Gerwen. And it needed that performance to stop Josh Roth. And just coming back, I alluded to it earlier, Dob, that when someone loses a game of darts, you are not normally waxing lyrical about someone as much as what everyone is on social media, everyone is on Sky Sports. And you know what? Even if you take away that 9 darter, which obviously no one ever would, but if you take away that, the whole game as well. But Josh Roth, now that there was a lot of talk from us a few Mondays back about the question marks are about what he can do on TV. Well, he's shut the three of us up straight away, I think, with what he's done this week and not just tonight. But this was a guy who, in January, was around the 12-1 mark to that through Q-Stall.
12-1, yeah.
He's now with our sponsors, BoyleSports. He's 16-1 to win the World Championships. That has happened in 11 months. Yes, that's a huge amount of pressure on Josh Roth. But what do you think are the realistic aims for Josh, the back end of this season? Because after that, surely sky is just the limit.
Look, there's a few things to dig into there. Firstly, to put those odds into context, for pre-Q School, Josh Roth was the same odds as Jerry Hendricks to get a tour card. He is now the same odds as Johnny Clayton to win the World Championship. That is a big progression in a very, very small time. It's weird to see this. Look, you said how you don't normally get the interview at the end with a loser, etc. This is only the second time we've seen Josh on Sky TV, isn't it? Let's be honest. He didn't make the match play, so there wasn't that explosive burst right at the start of the season. So it's actually the sport and the broadcaster taking note of floor performances, which isn't very like them. There's a lot of hype around Josh right now, and quite understandable. Pro Tour wins and whatever. So it's nice to see that that's being taken into consideration. Everybody else is picking it up. I think if a Rob Cross hadn't have happened in the last 5 years, you'd still be able to get decent value on Josh Roth. You'd still be able to get very, very good value on Josh Roth. But knowing that everybody was stung by Rob Cross in a very, very similar role, you've had Rob Cross and Leicester City win the Premier League in the last 15 years. Nobody's offering you long odds on some new hotshot sensation in an era where, look, the top three are back, but the top three are also producing more performances where you can get them. There's more players that can knock them out early that open the door for everybody else. So if you're not on Josh Roth now, save your money, because you're not going to get any value whatsoever unless you go big on him, and then you've got to hope he goes all the way. I don't see any each way value in him just for that part of the conversation. for the rest of the year, I think it's just keep doing what you're doing. Look, needs a good team around him, and at the minute he is going through dispute with management, so he needs that resolved as quickly as possible. He needs to get a solid manager behind him. That there's a couple in the game that are very, very good, that have been there or done similar with other high-profile players. Not get carried away with sponsors and whatever else may come. It seems very grounded. A lot of people have said that, and definitely seems like there are a few people that will give him a flick round the ear or something if he starts doing anything too untoward. John O'Shea was in the chat room earlier. He travels a lot of him. John will keep him grounded in particular, and there's a few others in that regard as well. So keep your feet on the ground. Do what you can do at the Players' Championship. Go down to minor, just enjoy that. He's got the World Youth Final to play as well as Players' Championship. The advantage he's got is he's not English, so he will not be out on the Friday night supporting the football. They've not qualified, so no distractions on that whatsoever. But he has got a potential second-round meeting with Michael van Gerwen again. And that'll just be another test in, is Josh Rock ready for the very, very upper echelons of PDC darts? Clearly got the ability, clearly got the game. Everything else now is mentality, preparation, and keeping yourself grounded. And I think Wayne Mardle spoke about that pretty well on the coverage as well. He's just got to be, like I said, he's just got to be grounded. He's got to be prepared to go through the motions, keep building it up. He's passing every test that we've seen. And that was just us not getting ahead of ourselves as well earlier in the year. We saw this talent, we saw this ability. We're like, can he do it on TV? Well, that's the next box ticked off now, effectively. It's not a title, but it's still a solid performance, decent group stage, European Championships, made second or third round, I think it was. Just keep building and building and building. You haven't got to reinvent the wheel first time out. Like, to go and win a World Championship at 21 in your debut year would be sensational. Don't get me wrong. And if he's the first ever reigning World Youth and World Champion at the same time, good luck taking that away from him, because I don't think that will ever happen again as well. But that's very much on the cards. But yeah, not get carried away. Feet on the ground. If you get another chance at Michael, there will be a lot of press around it, especially as it's on a different broadcaster, right? Sky have had all the attention for the last two tournaments. They've had Josh's TV debut. They've now had this unbelievable match against Michael that's had a 9-darter. ITV are going to want a piece of that next week. They've already got in for the World Youth Championship. If they both get through the first round, I think Simon's got, Michael's got Ryan Meikle, Josh has got Cameron Menzies. So if they both get through those two, a lot of attention on that Saturday will be about Josh versus Michael. It'll be on the main stage, and he's also got to prep for a World Youth Final the following day as well. So again, it's just preparation, keeping your feet on the ground, and then wait for that World Championship draw. He's safe in the knowledge that he's there. Keep taking opportunities, keep playing in everything that you can. And look, we can make all the jokes we want in the world about, is Josh Rock developed and should he be playing there? There's absolutely no way he's playing there next year. At this rate, there's a very good chance he's not even playing the Dev Tour first time round when it comes around in February or March or whatever is the first weekend.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. Just one more on Josh Rock before we move on to the final game. And Dan, I'm going to throw a message that I've had tonight from a friend in the chat room, John O'Shea. I've had a few throughout the year telling me how good Josh Rock is, but one tonight, told ya it started with, he's only just starting. You ain't seen nothing yet. That is the words of John O'Shea. If that is correct, how scary is that for 1, Nathan Durban, 2, Cameron Menzies, and then 3, the rest of the field?
Well, it is, and because I think, so we're our own worst enemy in sort of having little jokes about different things that go on in terminology, but because there's two interpretations of asking whether or not Josh Rock is developed. Because in all honesty, if you say, is it should he be on the development tour, and is it, or should he be competing, on the tour with the PDC? I think that's a fairly obvious question that anybody knows the answer to. In terms of, is Josh Rock fully developed into the dart player that he could potentially become? No. Like that's the short answer. Like, Josh Rock isn't fully developed into the dart player that he has the potential to be. And that's not just his game. It's all the things that we alluded to before. It's being on that tour over a period of time, and it's that almost being his job, being his living, living the life of a full-time darts professional on tour over a period of years and playing in big tournaments and dealing with sponsors and dealing with management and having to do media commitments and all these other things that come along with it that are exponentially increased the higher up that order of merit that you go and the deeper you go into tournaments. And all of that has the potential to have an effect both on his mindset and on his game. And that's in terms of it, could he develop further into a better dart player? Absolutely, 100%. I don't think I think we'd be foolish to, in any sport, realistically, barring potentially, gymnastics maybe, where have you got someone at his age as a professional sports person that's fully developed and, and hit their peak at his age? Well, virtually no sport in the world. So it is, you think, well, he can only get better. There's lots of room within his ability to develop. So terrifying, really. If you're somebody else, under 30, who's thinking, once this lot get out the way, I'll be able to, go and bang a load of world championships in. Like he is the danger to your potential future, isn't he? He's the man that's gonna prevent all those people reaching their aspirations.
Yeah, he certainly is, and many congratulations. I know we've spoken an awful lot about Josh Roth, but many congratulations for Michael van Gerwen in getting over the line and butting a place into the quarterfinals of the Grand Slam. And his opponent was either Luke Humphries and Ross Smith. And Dob, on this one, firstly, before we go into the Dame, did you feel a little bit sorry for these two? Because the fans were so pumped up for that MVG and Josh Roth Dame. They had the 9-darter, they had so much excitement that, to me, the crowd have been very, very good this weekend, and it's not something I've said before around Aldersley. I think they've been very, very good. But it was a little bit flat in this one from a crowd perspective when these two went onto the stage.
I think the atmosphere was sucked out of the room a little bit in the very last leg of Michael versus Josh. There was a lot of respect given at that moment, but I think that was, actually, we're not about to see the big upset. We'll give Michael the respect. There was a couple of whistles earlier on in the Suits game as well, I think. Nothing that we're not used to seeing. I don't want to start letting it go and whatever, but just stop that shit. But yeah, you're 100% right. I think Ross isn't slow, but he is that little bit more methodical as well, that just takes half a second out of the game constantly, I think, with his action to set up and get that first start going. And that can suck it out a little bit as well. After you've just seen a game that has been built up as game of the year, one of the best games ever at the Grand Slam, and whatever else you want to put on that, a 9-darter, you're 100% going to get that vacuum of atmosphere. Still a very, very good game, competitive game. It had its moments. It swung both ways. No real ignition moment. I think that's fair to say. Ross went 7 perfect twice. Yeah. Which got the reward that it deserved in the crowd reaction and whatever, but there was no big ton plus checkout. There was no big sucker punch. It was more like, you'll miss, I hit, rather than I'm going to do something incredible while you're up against it or whatever else. So that didn't help either. End of the night, not horrendous. But like I said, it's still not a terrible game. Mid-90s averages over this distance. Nothing to be shirked at. Solid performance from Luke Humphries, I guess, is the main takeaway from this. Ross comes back at him a little bit. More recent major winner. Luke Humphries has been to UK Open finals, been talking about potentially going and picking up a major for Luke Humphries, who has now gone to a record high in the rankings as well. And he seems in a better place right now, Dan. I think is the place I'm trying to go with this for Luke Humphries, is that start of the year very brightly, 4 Euro tours, drops off a bit with the birth of his child. Terrible tournament just before that. I think it was the Grand Prix, but mind clearly not on that. Struggles for a couple of weeks to get back into it, but now he's picking back up again at exactly the right time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we didn't see the best of him in that match, but he won the game. You know, he won the game against a guy that threw 10 180s and 20 140s. So, like, it's really weird. The numbers didn't make sense. That, like, you can try and unpick this game, but don't try it with the statistics because they don't make sense. Like, I'm sure they don't. None of the math seems to add up. It's really bizarre. But Yeah, it was. I think I said it earlier on about Nathan Aspinall in that it was a professional performance. He got himself ahead, and he just kept Smith at arm's length, and he did what he needed to do at the right time to just make sure that it didn't become too tight. It didn't become too much of a dogfight. There were a few moments towards the end where there was just a bit of potential. Smith's doubling. If he'd have hit maybe, well, I suppose you can see it's all down to legs. If he could have just upped that doubling percentage a little bit, this would have been a really tight game. In terms of scoring, they matched each other blow for blow, I think, throughout, and Smith scored very well. He just, at the most important moments in the game, couldn't get those doubles out. And that is eventually what undid him, to be honest. And it was just Luke Humphries with a very professional performance, hitting the doubles when he needed to, closing out the legs. Every time he had a bit of pressure on him, just managed to get the leg done before that pressure came back. And he was sweeping up legs when Ross was missing. And yeah, it wasn't. There was no real fireworks. There was nothing really to sort of write home about. But Luke Humphries definitely on the up. He's going to have to up his game, I think, to go any deeper in the tournament without a shadow of a doubt. But it was a promising performance, and we know he's got an amazing A game. I mean, just like, when we talk about the year that he's had, or the sort of, certainly the way that this is done, the 2 years that he's had, that win tonight moved Luke Humphries up to number 5 in the world. Like that's huge. That's absolutely massive. When you look at the company that he's keeping up there in that top 5, like that's monstrous. So he's got the A game. He just didn't quite find it tonight, but we'll see what he comes. We'll see what he comes back with.
Yeah, I think one thing it does allow is, especially with the Grand Slam, it allows that day's rest, and I think that will be needed more by Luke than it will MVG. I think MVG would prefer to be playing again tomorrow night with the sort of bounce of what's happened tonight, where for Luke Humphries, that rest will be good for him. Let's hear from Luke Humphries now.
I mean, forget about me and Ross. I think it was hard for us both to practice in the 45 minutes they were playing, because it was, I mean, I'll watch it back, but probably in the top 5 games I've ever witnessed. Michael was all the credit will go to Josh, but I think we have to give a little bit of credit to Michael there, because he was absolutely unbelievable. And that's a vintage performance from him. And Josh was fantastic, but the credit goes to Michael as well, not just Josh, because that was one of the best games I've ever witnessed, to be honest. So hopefully don't play that against me on Saturday. I mean, it's not worrying. Obviously Michael is got that ability at the moment where he can play fantastic, but he can also be human. I think if in 2017 you probably first to 16 you discount your chance for you walked up on the stage, but I know he's human. I know he can have mistakes in him, and I'm going to have to play 100 times better than what I just did, but I've beat him on long distance games before. UK Open semi-final, I won 11-5, so I know I can do it, and that's the key, because if you don't believe you can do it, then you won't do it. So yeah, I got the belief there, but I'm going to try and make sure the next 36 hours goes right, get my energy levels up, and make sure I walk up on that stage feeling 100% and not like 70% I felt tonight.
That is when one player is playing really well, or unbelievable, I should say, is when the word human is coming into the interviews. It means that they are questioning how good that guy really is right now. And Luke Humphries done that just there against talking about his next opponent, MVG. We are going to move on to predictions for tomorrow night, but before we do, as me and Dan have done for the past 2 nights, we've had a little prediction down between ourselves, haven't we, Dan? And we got very, very close tonight, because
we certainly have had a little game.
With that first one, we both had the Asp to win, and neither of us had the scoreline right. I went with Alan Souter to win 10-8, which was correct and levelled things up. We both went for the MVG win, and we was the either side to that. And then it all rested on Luke Humphries and Ross Smith. And I had Ross Smith to win 10-9. You had Luke Humphries, which means Dan was the winner of the last 16 predictions, which I was fuming about, because I was gloating by the time that Souter got over the line I thought, I'm really backing this.
I thought you were in, to be honest, when Souter got over the line. Certainly when you picked the correct score, because I thought, oh, he's done me here, but no. And then even then, towards the end of that last game, I thought Humphries has got this, but I might get the correct score here. Ross Smith missed a double. I thought, oh, he's literally just done me on the correct score. I'd have sailed that.
But it lines up perfectly to then look at tomorrow night's games, and two great games we've got for quarter-final Friday, starting with Michael Smith versus Joe Cullen. He's been let off because he's not been on the past couple of nights, so I'm going to start with Dob and put the pressure on him nice and early. We move up to the first to 16. Is it best 31? Right in saying tomorrow night we've got
stupid jump, by the way. Because I've not been on for 3 nights, I've not had a chance to have a pop at this format. But yet again, players playing that you played in the group and a race to 16, grow up.
Yes, as you said, players that played in the group. We had a little rant about that last night. Dob,
We're all in agreement, Gob. It's a shambles.
Coming to you.
And does that glass refill itself?
I've got a maid. Does it?
3/4 empty a minute ago, then it was full. I was like, I want one of those.
The worrying thing is, we all believe that he's got a maid next to him who's doing that. Totally believable, Dan.
Yeah, let's remember that.
Because it's you that's saying it. Dob, you're playing for time here. I know exactly what you're doing. What is the result on this first game? Which way are you going?
Michael 16-12.
It's repeat from the opening game. Yes, it's a slightly longer format, but 16-12 for Dob. And I believe it's me and you on tomorrow night. So these are being noted down. So I can remind you tomorrow night, like I've done with Dan, but it backfired. Dan, over to you on this one. Bully Boy or Rockstar?
Well, he's done me a little bit there, because that's exactly what I was gonna say. That's exactly what I was gonna go for. So to make it different, I've got to go slightly one way or the other. I've got to either give Cullen a little bit more or a little bit less, and I'm inclined to give him a little bit less and go Smith 16-11.
I am going for the full house, but I've had Bully Boy to win this tournament. I tipped it last week. I'm around the same mark, which is really worrying, but I'm going to go the other way. But I'm going to add a couple more on. I'm going to go 16-14 for Michael Smith. And then the second game, again, it's a game that we saw a few days ago. And Gerwen Price certainly had question marks about Barney doing this over a London format after we beat him the first time around. Dan, come to you first on this one. Is it going to be Barney's love affair with Wolverhampton continues, or is it going to be Gerwen Price's love affair with Wolverhampton continues, as they both love the place?
Stop it. Raymond van Barneveld 16-14.
Dan.
Well, everyone else is going to say the other way. Somebody might as well go out and say it.
Can't you tell when someone's not on the following night? When they
That's it, that is it. If I was on tomorrow night, I'd be thinking far more. I'd be taking far less risks about looking foolish. I can sit in my own house tomorrow and not look daft.
I'm sure you will.
I'm sure I will look daft, yeah. Always do.
Dob, over to you. I've got a feeling looking at the facial expressions of that one, you're going one way, but what result are you going with?
I'm going to ask Dan what the bloody hell's in that glass, mate. Whatever it is, don't touch that again. You've gone stupid. Especially if it goes close. If Barney's going to win, by the way, it has to be by a distance, because if it gets close, Gezi wins. That's how this works, right? But it doesn't get close at all. It might be close for the first mini session, and then after that, he gets nowhere near it. 16-7, Gerwen Price.
As gone big. I will be coming in the chat room for those predictions and popping a few up on the screen shortly. For me, I can't see anything other than a Price win. Dob, I'm edging closer towards yours as well.
Look, over this distance now, if anybody's got anything other than a Gerwen Price, Michael van Gerwen final, you're deluded.
I haven't got that, because I still think Michael Smith can produce However, I think I'm going to go for priced 10. So 16-10 for the win price. Let's just pop into the chat room and see some of the stores. We've got a 16-4 from 16-11, sorry, for Michael Smith from Harry. Bob's done 16-14 Smith. Craig's also on the same store. Jamie's done 16. Yeah, 16-10 Cullen. So Jamie's done 16-10 Cullen. Then we're moving on to the Barney game, and I've got a feeling that a few people in the chat room have done with a heart as well. Because let's start with a few of these. Bob 16-15 Barney. Craig 16-14 Barney. Jamie's done more along the lines of what me and Dob and done for, and 16-8. We've got another 16-13 Barney. They are split 16-12 price from G's. Collins on 16-12 Barney. Tommy 16-12 Desi. There is a right mixture in the chat room in this one where it seemed to be more bully boy in the first one. But that does mean for night 6, we are at a close. Dob, I believe it's me and you on tomorrow night.
Yeah, if I have to.
Dan Simpson, thank you very much for your company for the past 3 nights. And again, well done on your predictions. It pains me to say it, but you snuck over the line.
Lee Boyce has lost a predicting competition. Imagine my shot.
See, that's why I feel very comfortable having won the prediction competition, being able to save Barney and just run away and see you all again.
The one thing, Dob, I'm holding on to with that is I did predict that Peter Wright wouldn't dare the group, and I predicted that Alan Souter would beat Johnny Clayton, and they're the 2 shots. Nothing else I'm going to say the rest of this week is going to be right, but they're 2.
Although it is Friday night tomorrow, so I'll be in the pub, and there's a decent chance that you guys will be on the telly in the pub. So if I have got that right, Barney 16-14, I expect at least a mention on that one.
You only get a mention if you're drinking on this show, if you're playing a drinking game beforehand. That's right, isn't it, Dob? And someone says Glen Durrance or stuff like that. You was on as well, Dan. You remember the night. Right.
You didn't thank me for that the following morning. Let's put it that way.
I did not. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us in the chat room. Another great show. Thank you, as always, to BoyleSports, our sponsors. And we will be back tomorrow night after the 2 quarterfinals of First 16. Thank you very much, gents. And I will see you tomorrow.